Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here this afternoon. My name is Nia Tamburi, and I'm a member of the Education Outreach Work Group for the Cancer Environment Network of Southwestern Pennsylvania. I'm also the Program Director of Cancer Bridges. Today is our third lecture in our speaker series. The series is a project of the network, which is composed of organizations and individuals who are concerned about environmental chemicals and how they are contributing to our region's high rates of cancer. The organizations co-sponsoring today's webinar are Cancer Bridges, formerly our clubhouse and Cancer Caring Center. At Cancer Bridges, we provide support for those impacted by cancer, including counseling, support groups, health and wellness classes, family and youth activities, and much more. Young Adult Survivors United is a community in Western Pennsylvania for young adult cancer survivors and their co-survivors, and Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. LLS focuses on blood cancers and improving the quality of life of patients and their families through research, education, policy, and advocacy. The websites for these organizations will be found in the chat. Now I want to introduce today's speaker, Michelle Nakarati-Chapkus. Michelle has worked in the nonprofit field for over 25 years, gaining expertise in nonprofit management, strategic planning, fundraising, communications, coalition building, and policy. She has spoken on environmental health topics at local, state, and national conferences, including the American Public Health Association and Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. In addition, Michelle has been featured in local, regional media outlets. She holds a bachelor's degree from the University of Pittsburgh and is a graduate of Leadership Pittsburgh and serves on nonprofit and government boards and committees. Michelle is going to speak with us for about 30 minutes, and then we will have time for some questions. Michelle, thank you for being here this afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mia. Thank you. I'm going to make sure I turn my phone around so I can keep track of the time. And certainly feel free to put it in the chat if I need a 5-minute warning. It's nice to be with all of you today. Your speaker series, thank you so much for reaching out and asking me to participate. It's an honor to be here. And as many of you know, our organization, Women for a Healthy Environment, is a proud collaborator and supporter of the Cancer and Environment Network of Southwestern PA. So just to give a little bit of background about the organization, Women for a Healthy Environment really does focus on those environmental exposures that impact public health. We have 3 main program areas: healthy homes, healthy schools, and healthy early learning centers, also known as our childcare centers. And we work through educational programming, technical assistance, coalition building, and advocacy to making certain that where we spend our days are as healthy as possible. So, thinking about where families live, learn, work, and play is really at the core of our focus. And the other important part of that is that we really do our primary prevention strategies, our outreach and education, and our direct community-based work in environmental justice communities. We really think about and explore ways to provide solutions that are equity focused. And so, we know that there are lots of disparities in EJ communities, and that's where we want to spend our time to really making certain that we create a thriving community for all. So a little bit about some of the work that we do: hold workshops, I mentioned, conferences, getting together with unique groups that perhaps or people would be surprised at making the connections, like our firefighters, perhaps down below, where there's a strong correlation and connection between that occupational exposure and cancer risk, as well as being fierce advocates and lobbying for policies that we know make sense and better protect our health. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the health effects in the space that we're in when we're talking about these consumer products, personal care products, and cleaning products in particular. We're going to focus on today. And we know that studies show through decades that exposure to these toxic substances are linked to many health conditions. And so, we're all here today with our common interest in cancer, and that'll be something that you'll hear throughout the presentation. Here are some other health effects that we see by exposure from these various consumer products and linkages that have been made: weakened immune system, autism and ADD, and other neurological disorders. Endocrine disruption, we spend a lot of time on in our organization in terms of thinking about and knowing how we see girls going through puberty at earlier ages and the infertility issues that we see that have really increased over the last several decades across this country, decreased sperm counts, decreased levels of testosterone and estrogen. And it's the endocrine system. So we also see metabolism impacts. And so that leads to things like diabetes and what we call obesogens, knowing that some of the products that we use have ingredients that have been linked to endocrine disruption. So it means that they interfere with or impact the natural hormones in our body, these synthetic hormones. And so as a result, then we're seeing metabolism being impacted, and then these chemicals and ingredients called obesogens leading to increase in weight. Cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, and mental health are all important things that we want to take note of. So we know that when we have all of these various exposures in our environment, that the timing matters, right? So the timing of exposure, and that's why I have some pictures here to show. Women who are have their window of exposure as it relates to of childbearing age, young girls going through and having that window of when they begin menstruation, and then also women through menopause. All of these are unique windows that open up where perhaps there might be a greater exposure because of the physiological effects that are happening in the body. The size of the person matters. We can't treat our children like little adults. And so that's significant and something that we have to pay attention to, as well as the amount of dose. And so this is to tell you that little doses and little exposures matter. You don't need to have a huge exposure in order to have a health impact. And then cumulative effects of exposure. So if we think about, and we'll talk a little bit more about this, all of the different things that we use in our home all throughout the day, and then if you put all of those on a table in front of you and you look at all of the various ingredients on each of those labels, we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of different potential exposures. And so these cumulative effects matter. Children are especially vulnerable, and I can't put enough emphasis on that. Pound for pound, breathe more water, breathe more air, drink more water, consume more food than adults. And as a result of that, we know that they are a very vulnerable population that we need to put support around. And so we know that many chemicals, science tells us that they pass from a pregnant mom to the fetus. And these prenatal exposures, as you can see on the graph, to certain chemicals are associated with stillbirth and miscarriage, birth defects, childhood cancers, and impaired brain development. So this all really matters. And the opportunity to talk with you all today is not to scare anybody away into not using anything in their homes, but it's an opportunity to pause and take assessment of what we do have around us and how we can perhaps make some better choices just based on the information that we learn about today. So lots of chemicals used in our homes, as you think about that, over 40,000 different chemicals. And so a lot of these chemicals fall what's known as the Toxic Substances Control Act. It's the federal regulation under EPA that guides chemical regulation across our country. And it was written in 1976. It had been woefully outdated, had never been amended until many organizations across the country, including ours, started lobbying to have it amended. And so in 2016, then there was the Frank Lautenberg Chemical Safety Act for the 21st century. And this was an opportunity to go back and now say, we need to constantly be monitoring and evaluating the chemicals that are put into the market, put into commerce, which was a very slow process before. Before, under what's known as TSCA, essentially the American public didn't have the assurance that chemicals were being tested before they hit the market and proven to be unsafe. And so as a result, EPA had the burden of proving a chemical to be unsafe. And so we had to change the system. And so the Lautenberg Act requires that. And so since 1976, only 11 chemicals have been banned. But the good news is, with more information and knowledge, we have the power to drive change. So by using a lot of this stuff in our homes, we really can impact our indoor air quality. And so that's one of the other things, is that knowing that we have paints and stains and adhesives in terms of consumer products, cleaning supplies and such, those actually all can relate to making a poor indoor air environment for us. And knowing in the pandemic, when we spent so much time indoors, it's a place where we really want to make certain it's as safe and healthy as possible, because we have these health impacts from poor indoor air quality, irritation of the eyes, nose, and throat from exposure to these various chemicals, headaches and dizziness and fatigue. And long term, we're talking about asthma and COPD impacts, as well as heart disease and cancer. So let's just take a quick look. And so the list on the right is just an example of all of the stuff that we use in our homes, perhaps on a weekly basis, that all contribute to potential health impacts. So there's a lot of cleaning products that people use: laundry detergent, oven cleaner, toilet bowl cleaner, rug cleaner, upholstery cleaner. Just think about, you could probably fill up a countertop with all the different things that we have in our home, because the market really wants us to have a product for every single need and every single room in our house. And what I'm here to tell you is we could probably take a step back and assess all of these and say, we might be able to get away with just 2 or 3, believe it or not. And an all-purpose cleaner is likely something that you can use in your toilet and in your tub and on your countertops. And it can be very effective and work well, that you don't need to spend a lot of time, effort, and money assessing all these products and figuring out which one to use. So there's also an environmental impact from using all of these different products. And so in 2002, the US Geological study had determined that there were impacts to our waterways. And how did that happen? Well, they were taking water samples from waterways, and they were looking at that, showing that essentially our wastewater treatment systems and our sewage treatment systems aren't able to filter out these chemicals that we're describing today. And so 70% of the streams contained detergents, and 66% contained harmful disinfectants. And so as a result of that, we know that, for instance, a lot of these are endocrine disrupting chemicals, and we're seeing that what we wash down the drain impacts our aquatics ecosystem. And so we have, for instance, amphibians that are showing characteristics of both sexes. So this is big business. Cleaning supplies and personal care products are really big business, and that's something else that we need to know. And here's just a sense of the cost. In terms of the US laundry and cleaning market, the cleaning industry is divided into a couple of different segments: residential, commercial, specialty. And in 2020, household cleaning products had sales totaling approximately $1.25 billion. So that's a lot of money. And that's why there's a lot of interest in terms of the marketing. And it's the holiday season, right? You're going to see a lot of more companies promoting their products, especially fragrance products, because we all want to have that home for the holidays set in our home during this time of year. And so it's really important to know that 17% though, in new studies and new data, 17% of consumers from the US stated that they always look out for eco-friendly labels when buying cleaning and laundry products. This has dramatically increased since we started doing these presentations in 2009. It's really a movement that's afoot where people are becoming more environmentally aware and eco-conscious, and they're paying attention, and they know what they use around their home and in and on their bodies matters. And so we have people paying much more attention, which is good news. And why can I not advance my slide here? Let's see. Well, let's try moving this. Sorry about that. There we go. Okay, and so here's another example of numbers, right? 63 chemical products can be found in the American average home. And that translates to gallons, approximately 10 gallons of harmful chemicals that are in your home at any given time. So how do we reduce that? And we'll talk a little bit about, how to think about what to avoid and how to make safer choices. So avoid products, like go to your product underneath your kitchen sink, see what's underneath it, pull it out, and look for some of these words: poison, danger, warning, flammable, and fatal. And oftentimes you'll see that on some products. If we were in person, I'd have a display in front and I'd have some people taking a look at the various ingredients that are on the back of some of those labels. And some of them don't have any information listed because chemical companies such as these that make various cleaning products, are not required to disclose of any of the ingredients on the label. And so that's a need that has to change at the federal level. And there's been momentum afoot for many years to get a household disclosure labeling law in effect so that we as educated consumers can make an informed decision. There's cleaning, sanitizing, and disinfecting products. They all do something different. I'll just very, very briefly highlight it because it's something that is important to know and understand. And once you know it, then you can move on. But basically, cleaning is using a detergent and water to physically remove dirt, grime, and germs from surfaces. And by just cleaning, using good old soap and water, it's been found to remove as much as 99% of germs when microfiber cleaning tools are used in conjunction with that. And this has been something that's really important to note during the pandemic because we had a tendency, we didn't know a lot early on the pandemic. And so disinfectants were flying off the shelves, right? A lot of people were worried. They wanted to make certain that they killed the virus with the disinfectant. But when they looked at the molecular structure of the virus, they found that having that it's a fatty deposit around it could be broken with detergent and water. So that physical activity of cleaning with soap and water was found to be very effective in removing the virus. So there's another methodology in terms of cleaning, and it's called sanitizing. And now that reduces the number of germs going beyond the 99.9%. This is really used in food preparation areas, and you see it in childcare centers and on contact surfaces. So thinking about where you have your food preparation, think about doors and handles and such in other places. Mouth toys and pacifiers, for instance, are sanitizers because we want to make certain that it's safe yet effective if young children are putting it in their mouths. And then disinfecting, that's I spoke to early before. This is where these are high risk areas that collect a lot of germs. Doorknobs, cabinet handles, drinking fountains in places. But a lot of people don't know how to effectively use a disinfectant in their home. So they're grabbing these products off the shelf. And what we find is that they spray the disinfectant and they wipe and they move on. Well, they've done absolutely nothing with that particular surface because if you look at the bottle of a disinfectant, it actually tells you that it needs to have a dwell time to work effectively. Anything from maybe 30 seconds up to several minutes long. These disinfectants have to sit wet on a surface in order for it to kill the germ that is present. So that's something else that people don't pay much attention to on cleaning products that is critical in order for it to work effectively. And we know that cleaning products provide an occupational health exposure. And that's something else that we want to really think about is that, individuals who clean as an occupation are at increased risk because of the exposure that they have day in and day out with their position that they have in their cleaning practices. So here's a study that just happened in September of 2021, it was released. And they found that changes in Latino women's exposure to cleaning chemicals associated with switching from these conventional products to what we know and identify as green household cleaning products actually did help in terms of reducing exposure and impacting health. And so as you see at the bottom in the discussion, it said that the study demonstrates that choosing cleaning products that are marketed as green, and we'll talk briefly about that, may reduce your exposure to several carcinogens and endocrine disruptors. Future studies are always needed, but there are products out in the market that we know are beneficial and better than others. And so we can talk a little bit about how do we choose those. Looking for these seals on products is always helpful. The Green Seal Certified, it's a third-party certified vetted product, better for our health, better for our environment, more sustainably, company that is more invested in sustainability. So the Green Seal Certified is one of them, and then Safer Choice is another. And if you have these products, if you have these labels on products, you know that they've been vetted and they are safer options to use. And so here's an example of where you find it on a seventh generation bottle. It has actually the Safer Choice, and it has the Eco logo certification as well. Look for companies like Seventh Generation, frankly. They have a label that you peel back and they'll list every single ingredient in their product. They're transparent, forthcoming with information. And those are the companies that we want to support in terms of who's telling you about the product and what the ingredients are and why they're in them. So here are a couple of examples of some. I can make these slides available afterward because I know that we still have to talk about personal care products as well. But here are some examples of ingredients to avoid and why. Certainly, you never want to mix ammonia and bleach. You're creating a toxic gas in your home. And there are some other compounds that are in disinfectants that we see a lot, like ammonium quaternary compounds, also known as quats. And they're in a lot of different products, but disinfectants at this time in the pandemic, certainly we see a lot of those. And they're eye, ear, nose, and throat irritants, as well as skin irritants. So a lot of, think about the skin, it's the largest organ in our body. And so we talk about absorption. And so penetration in the skin is something to be concerned about. Environmental Working Group, EWG, has a guide to healthy cleaning products. You can check out their site. They've got ratings for more than 2,500 products. It's a good place to go and take a look. If you wanted to look at your Clorox cleanup and see how it ranks, you could put it in here and see what the rating system is. Now, personal care products, we'll switch and talk a little bit about that for a few moments. This is a study that the Environmental Working Group had done several years ago. They found that on average, teenage girls used about 17 products daily, the adult woman, 12 products, and the adult male, 6 products daily. And so if you think about all that stuff that you use generally before you even get out the door, it's a lot of potential exposure that you want to think about. Well, what are those ingredients in our personal care products? And it's everything from our toothpaste to our soaps and our deodorants and our shampoos, and then throw into the mix all of the cosmetics. So cosmetics contain about 5 different categories of toxic ingredients that we're concerned about. Carcinogens, also cancer causing, is another way to think about that. Those precursors of carcinogens, endocrine disruption, you heard me talk a little bit about earlier, penetration enhancers, and then these allergens and sensitizers. Again, this is big business. So this is why you oftentimes don't hear the story about these particular topic areas. What we found is in 2012, the beauty industry just in the United States alone was a $70 billion industry. And that's risen by about 20 billion over the years. So currently it's about a $90 billion industry in the United States. And across the globe, look at how these numbers have exponentially increased. We've gone from $483 billion industry in 2020 to what's projected at $784 billion in 2025. And then Asia Pacific and North America are dominating that industry space, and they account for more than 60% of that total. Where are people buying their personal care products? As you see on the left, most of the time at the drugstore or pharmacy, and then some mass merchandisers as well, falls quickly behind in terms of online shopping as well. And we've seen that over the pandemic, a lot of people doing online purchasing. And that's a significant contribution of where people are buying their personal care products. So the United States has a very different way of operating than the European Union, and it's important to note that. The United States personal care products are guided under the FDA, Food and Drug Administration, and it defines cosmetics as products for cleansing, beautifying, promoting attractiveness, or altering the appearance. It's an interesting definition. If you look, though, on the right-hand side, we've got the European Union Cosmetics Directive. And as you can see, it defines a cosmetic as any substance or preparation intended to be placed in contact with various external parts of the human body, with the teeth, with the oral cavity, perfuming, changing appearance, correcting. It's a little bit more in depth. And so as a result of that, not only just a definition of, we'll find how we'll describe a little bit about how they approach testing of chemicals. So there are some chemicals that we want to avoid, certainly. This list is similar, like the cleaning products. There are definitely some chemicals out there that have been well vetted through science that we know impact our health. And so, for instance, I'll use parabens as an example. They've been linked to cancer, lots of different kinds of parabens. You'll see them listed on your personal care products. And the thing to note about a paraben is the only use for that chemical, that ingredient, is to give a product a longer shelf life so that you can put your soap on that product or your deodorant on product on that store shelf, and it can have a longer shelf life. You know where you see a lot of parabens, interestingly enough, is in when you go to a hotel, and because they buy in bulk, they store in their warehouse facility, and they repurpose, right? So there's constant, they're always repurposing day in and day out when they're cleaning new toiletries in the room. These toiletries, take a look at them, oftentimes have many, many parabens listed on the label. Formaldehyde, it's a known human carcinogen. It's an eye, nose, and throat irritant. Why is it in our personal care products? We find it in those types of products that oftentimes create a sudsy type of after effect when you use it. So soaps and shampoos and such, as well as our nail products have formaldehyde in them. And I'll give you an example of how to look for healthier, safer options in those as well. So here are just a couple of pictures. Pictures say, 1,000 words. Parabens, you heard me talk about. Phthalates, another hormone disruptor as well. Phthalates essentially give plastic its elasticity. So bottles contain phthalates that your products are in. Nail polish contains phthalates to give it that elasticity to apply. And phthalates hold fragrance. And so it makes a product, like when you spray your product and you want it to last, phthalates are what's binding and holding that scent. And so they're in a ton of different things, but also, again, a hormone disruptor that we're concerned about. Heavy metals, lead in your lipstick. Yeah, that's a real thing. The FDA has done testing and has found heavy metals in lipsticks. Usually it's in like the darker, more vibrant colors. 1,4-dioxane is not an ingredient you'll necessarily find on a label. It's kind of a hidden ingredient, but it's getting to the formaldehyde releasing ingredients that I talked about a little bit. You hear, for instance, a lot about PFAS and it being a forever chemical. A lot of these chemicals that we talk about are known as PBTs. They're persistent and they're bioaccumulative in our bodies and they're toxic. And so PFAS is a forever chemical. It's synthetic, man-made, and we know it's been linked to various cancers. And a type of PFAS, PTFE, has been found in makeup, and it's the makeup that's used to give a shiny glow, and another area of concern. And then coal tar I have pictured here. It's found in a lot of different hair dyes, again carcinogen, and something that we see in hair dyes that we know are of concern. Let me just check my time. Couple more minutes here, about 10 more minutes or so, and we'll make certain that we've got time for questions. Carcinogens in cosmetics over here, it's really hard to decipher sometimes on a label. And so we help you out by saying, here's what you look for. So at that arrow on the left, it's not going to say formaldehyde, but it'll say, but they're formaldehyde releasing preservatives. And so quaternarium 15, all the ureas, the DMDM hydantoins, these are all things that you will see on an ingredient on a label, and it's the caution flag should be put up and think about a healthier, safer alternative. And then here's a listing down below. Some of them I already described to you on the previous slide, and here are some additional carcinogens found in personal care products. And then fragrance, it's a mystery ingredient. If you go to a product, it'll just say fragrance on the label. But what does that really mean? Usually there are thousands of different chemicals that are utilized to make up that particular ingredient. And so 80% of those, we know of those chemicals are not tested for safety. And so we should be concerned. Usually you'll have probably a couple of dozen of those chemicals to make up what's known as that secret and proprietary ingredient. And that's why you don't know what the ingredients are. Manufacturers don't have to tell you. But if you think about fragrance and all the different products that it's in, here's an example. It's everywhere. And I have to say, think about when I was talking earlier about this time of year, plugging in, right? The plugins and things that are aerosols that are emitting these VOCs, volatile organic compounds into our air, are really decreasing our air quality. Putting a little freshener on your vent in front of your face as you're driving is not a good idea. You're just blasting these VOCs into your car, and there's nowhere for it to escape. And so you really want to think about all the different stuff that we use that contains fragrance all day. And how do we think about safer solutions? Well, go to a fragrance-free project. Now, sometimes it'll say fragrance-free or unscented. It has a masking chemical in it for that. So you have to really be careful and dig deeper into the label. But looking and swapping out some of these heavy fragranced products, or like skipping your fabric softener, is a healthier and safer choice. And here's something I want to mention about being at the salon. Oh, I want to go back. So we know that there are various products that are marketed to women of color that are highly toxic. And so it's something to know about and be concerned about, and think about how to have safer, healthier options. And so like a lot of folks are turning to hemp dyes, for instance, instead of the traditional dyes. Here was a study in 2018, hair products for Black women contain a mix of hazardous ingredients. We know that Black women are disproportionately impacted by various hair products, and it's something that we want to bring to light and make certain that people are aware of. And the beauty of this is that women have the power to make change, right? And so by educating and informing, they can make safer and healthier choices. And as an example, there are, for instance, a lot of natural hair meetup groups that are popping up all over the country that really help women through the transition of using less chemical, less product, and moving to a more natural hair. So here's an example of Brazilian blowout. Why do I bring this up? Brazilian blowout happened a couple of years ago, and it was a product, and it's still used actively today. Women might have frizzy hair, and it's a smoothing treatment. And so Brazilian blowout was labeled as formaldehyde free, used in salons. And what did we find? We found that salon workers were having bleeding noses and headaches, and nosebleeds, headaches, and other respiratory conditions at an alarming rate. And so there was a salon, I believe in Oregon, that had done some testing and analysis when they sent it out working with a partner, and found high levels of formaldehyde in this product, high levels of formaldehyde. And it was labeled as formaldehyde free. So it went through a whole attorney general's lawsuit that ensued. And so the company was called out for it, which was good in terms of product mislabeling. But the travesty of it is that because the laws are so weak with our cosmetics, the FDA could not recall that product. And so they could only say to Brazilian blowout, you have to issue a voluntary recall. They didn't have the authority to pull it off of the store shelf. And that's where our system is broken. And so if you go to this story of cosmetics, you can Google it. It's a fun, great evergreen, meaning the situation that it describes when it was written several years ago, still relevant today. And it talks about how we got to where we are with cosmetics in the system that we have today. The laws that guide these products were written in 1938. So I would say they need updated, right? You just heard me talk about one example of the inability to recall a product. Let me just give you a couple of quick ones that happened just this year. Hand sanitizer. Hand sanitizer was getting recalled by the dozens, if not hundreds, by the time it was done during the pandemic. And there were levels of, there was an ingredient, which is methanol, that was found in there. Again, voluntary recall. Wasn't on the label, concern if anybody was ingesting it, in case kids got a hold of the hand sanitizer. Sunscreens, that was the predominant story all summer long. Sunscreens were being recalled, Neutrogena, Coppertone. Why? Because they had a carcinogen, benzene that was contained in it. And now we just heard today that there was yet another recall of deodorant containing benzene. And a lot of times what we're finding with benzene in these personal care products is it's contained in aerosols. So the thing, when we're spraying is when benzene is being added to these various products. Over 500 products sold in the US contain ingredients that have already been banned in other countries and Europe. Japan and Canada are those examples. So I'm going to wrap up very quickly here because I'm sensitive to the time. But here's just what happens because our laws were in 1938. We have what's known as the Cosmetic Ingredient Review Panel, and they're essentially made up of industry representatives who are tasked with guiding the safety of these personal care product ingredients. Over 12,500 chemicals in the stuff that we use every day. And as of March of 2017, about 4,700 of those had been reviewed. And 4,600 were determined to be safe. 12 determined to be unsafe, and then 117 that were a lot of question marks. But let's compare that to the European Union, which has banned more than 1,000 of these ingredients, these chemicals that we've talked about that are used in personal care products. We describe it as perhaps the fox guarding the hen house because of the makeup of the cosmetic ingredient review panel. So they've they've gotten a little bit better, but still a low percentage in terms of the amount of chemicals that are used in that which is tested. No authority to recall a product, and chemical companies can use a lot of stuff. They can use ingredients or raw material, except for some color additives and such. So there's a lot of flexibility and leeway there. And be careful with labels in personal care products because there's no industry guidance, no regulatory body in terms of labeling, right? So you'll see something called organic or green or eco-friendly. It's a marketing standard only, and it's not anything that is a legal standard of which they're abiding by any type of regulation. So beware. Make your own do-it-yourself products. That's an example. This exfoliant with strawberries and apricot oil and salt is a lovely exfoliant with ingredients you have around your house. So a couple simple solutions. Avoid fragrance products and colognes as much as possible. We have a wallet card of the top 12 toxins to avoid. You can check that out and look for the list of ingredients that you don't want to have in your personal care products. Choose products with fewer ingredients, those you can pronounce. Seek products that are plant-based. Try do-it-yourself recipes. The EWG has a database as well for personal care products. There's a new labeling now called Made Safe. You can look for the Made Safe seal. And if you go to a salon and they're using products that you're not happy with, bring your own. So, look for those that are listed. For instance, nail polish, toxic trio free is right on the label. Here's the EWG database that you can look at, plug in a product or scan it on your phone. When you scan it, the barcode, it goes directly to a database and it can give you a rating system. Green is good, red is avoid. And then here's the list of the ingredients I mentioned earlier that we produced. And we can lobby, right? We can petition, we can be advocates, and we can say, enough's enough. These laws are antiquated that guide our personal care products. So there's been a lot of discussion with Senators Dianne Feinstein, Susan Collins, who are really committed to having a new bill and to really amending how our chemicals or ingredients are regulated in personal care products. And so this would give the FDA stronger authority, and sometimes more government regulation is really a key and essential. And this is a case in terms of personal care product safety that we need more regulatory authority over the products that we pick up off the store shelf every day. And then I'll just end by saying two things. One is that we have to really be thinking about where people access products and think about accessibility. So for instance, there are a lot of environmental justice communities that might only have access to a dollar store. And let's know and understand what products are available in that store if that's the only place that they have to purchase items. So if that's the case, they could go, if a dollar store is your only retail outlet in your community, pick up some baking soda and vinegar and use that as your cleaning product. Pick up a fragrance-free soap. So Dove fragrance-free, for instance, has a better rating and on the EWG database than some of the other more fragrant ones. So yeah, it's a matter of being informed and educated and thinking about, and we can help you. Reach out to us and our team. We're happy to scan products all the time and give you ideas for what works, what doesn't. We like to test things ourselves as consumers. But let's end with the precautionary principle. When activity raises threats of harm to human health or the environment, precautionary measures should be taken, even if some cause and effect relationships are not fully established scientifically. And so those are words that we live by at Women for a Healthy Environment, and we hope that you do too. It's a complicated space, but it's one that we can tease out and really thinking about the products that we use and bring into our home every day that we ourselves perhaps are exposed to, as well as our family members. And it's a work in progress. So when you run out of your shampoo and you have to go and buy and replace, take a moment to pause, look on the store shelf, look at your ingredients, say, all right, is this something that perhaps under the database says, maybe something I should look for and perhaps not replace, but maybe there's something on the shelf above, below, or beside that is a better, healthier, and safer alternative. They are out there, and that's the the good news I will share is that today in 2021, the amount of products available that compared to when we started this work in 2009, it has really grown exponentially. And so look for those companies that are transparent and say, this is what the ingredients are that are in it or that it doesn't have. Look, I look at Shea Moisture and they say, it doesn't have, and you'll have a list of 12 different things. They are transparent and saying, we don't want these chemicals in our products. And so for that, we're giving you a healthier, safer option. Okay, so I'll stop there. Let's see, is there anything in the chat? I don't see anything in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing. And if there are no questions in the chat, we're a small group. People could go off mute certainly as well and ask any questions they have. If I don't have the answers, I'll get them for you following our presentation today. But I really wanted to give you a high-level summary of, knowing and understanding all the consumer products we bring into our house. Being willing to try and explore and make your own product is really a fun thing to do as well, especially this time of year, because then you can bottle it up and give it as holiday gifts perhaps. But there are lots of opportunities to experiment and explore. And we have some recipes that we can share with you too for how to do that.
Thank you, Michelle. Does anybody have any questions for Michelle? Melissa, I think you're muted.
I am, thank you. I have two, but if others have questions, feel free to sort of catch one on the back end. One would be if there's any approach to how you can get buy-in from your teen. So my 15-year-old who just dropped $100 of her own money at Sephora, right, isn't gonna well, this had a huge impact on me, and I think she would listen. Yeah. They're definitely more aware of the environment and stuff, now than we were maybe growing up, but maybe an approach to that. And a second question would be is it too late? There was lots of sort of scary stuff at the beginning, right? Should I be testing my kids for lead? What, is there anything that you should be aware of?
Okay, great questions. Let's go to the teens first. So I am a mom now of a 17, 19, and 21-year-old young adults. And so they've been hearing about this for 10 plus years, right? And it's not easy. And we've had battles in our house, honestly, and there's been some give and take. I've had to compromise in some instances. And so, for instance, my girls are really willing to use a safer shampoo as an example. And so they'll go and they've got their favorite now that they use, and it's, one that's been vetted. But now we've used it as an opportunity to scan and explore and put a little bit of the consumer spending power in their pocket, right? So they can scan something themselves on their phones and check it out and say, oh, well, here's an eyebrow pencil that might be rated as a 10, which is not good. And here's one that's a 2. And so it's really a good opportunity to explore and educate and spend time in the Target aisles to have them really understand, knowing that the message is that we're protecting their health and that these are good lessons learned and good habits to make now that last a lifetime. But I'll tell you, my son is like my dad. He got my dad's gene that he loves his cologne. And so I've said to him, okay, can you only use it on special occasions and not slather yourself in it every day? So a give and take is definitely something that we try and minimize as much as possible.
Thank you.
And then in terms of getting your children tested, I would say that that's likely not necessary right now. But think about products that you're especially lip products, right? Because think about how many times a day we're licking our lips, right?
Right.
And we're ingesting and absorbing. Ingest, inhale, absorb are the things that we always talk about that we do with this stuff. And so, looking at some products that are made with shea butter and made with beeswax are good, safer. And then generally those have all natural ingredients instead of these synthetic ingredients that we know are driven by petroleum. These synthetic ingredients are made by fossil fuels. And so not only are they impacting our health, but they're impacting our environment. There's a direct correlation between the two. But I would say, take caution, try and evolve over time, and certainly, make sure that as there's opportunities to present, to swap out, make it a fun, interesting activity.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're
Appreciate it.
welcome.
Michelle,
Sure.
Michelle, what about what Melissa said? Is it too late?
No, you mean in terms of too late, like the damage is already done?
Yeah.
No, I'd say, nothing is ever too late. And certainly things, we find that our body, it excretes things over time as well, right? And so that's the other part of this, is that a lot of things that we find the body excretes over time. And, I'll take BPA as an example. There have been a lot of studies to say how long does it last in the body and how long does it get excrete. Don't put the heavy burden of yourselves on that you've been using this stuff for decades and decades. Look at it as a clean sweep moving forward, and know that, whatever you do now is benefiting the health moving onward.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
It's interesting. There's lots of biomonitoring studies that have been done by the CDC. And so the CDC every couple of years, I think it's every 2 years, does a biomonitoring study. And so that just gives us a pretty good snapshot of, essentially average Americans and their use of and exposure to various toxics that are in our environment on a regular basis. And so these biomonitoring studies give us a pretty good snapshot of exposure. What we can do is just make better decisions moving forward.
Michelle, there's a question in the chat. What are your thoughts about 7th generation being owned by Unilever, a company with a huge environmental footprint?
So, what goes hand in hand with people becoming more educated consumers and driving the market demand is that these smaller companies that had started, like 7th generation, like Burt's Bees and others, that were a small company that got a foot, have now been purchased by some of these major companies. And so we do see a lot of that acquisition that has happened over the years. What I have seen with those two particular companies in particular is that they've kept the integrity of the product. And so that's really important to know, is that the folks who developed those companies, who created them and founded them, were very much sensitive to the fact that the efficacy of the product could change over time. And so we have seen with these large acquisitions that there have been very specific requirements put in place at the time of acquisition to ensure that the integrity of the product remains. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
It has been so nice to spend time with you this afternoon. I love a lunch and learn. It's a great time to kind of take a break from your day, hop on, learn something new, something perhaps that you can incorporate into daily living to making our world a healthier, safer space for all. And so it's been an absolute pleasure to be with you. I guess I should let me put my email in the chat real quick before we leave. It's just Michelle with 2 L's at, and then it's our organization name all spelled out, Women for a Healthy Environment. I'll probably spell it wrong as I'm typing and saying it here, .org. You can certainly reach out. Did I get it right in there? Healthy environment. Yeah. Reach out anytime. And if you have a question, I've actually had people who have called and said, like, I'm at the Target and I need to see, like, is this okay? My sister's one of them. And so, we're always happy to answer questions. Check us out on social media. And, we're always interested in exploring and learning about new products too. So if you have something you want to test and share your experience with us, let us know. We've done that with deodorants a lot too. Like we have a blog post on our website about trying various deodorants to find out which one was most effective, because, sometimes not all of them work. So, check out blogs and things of that nature too. And it'll give you, hopefully some good resources that you can use moving forward.
Michelle,
have a good day.
Amanda asked if the slides would be shared for the presentation.
Yes, I can do that in whichever way is feasible. We'll think, I can put them on our website. Maybe that might be a good place to go. And I'll give all of you a link of where that might be. And then we can also maybe even put them on the Cancer and Environment Network's website too. So they'll be in both places, and then you can have a place to check that out.
Just one little thing just to catch people's attention in the chat. There's a really great news around the New York State passage of a law to limit 1,4 dioxane. Michelle, I don't know if you have any comment about that, but it does seem as if, although this is a law in another state, that it's going to have really far-reaching implications
Yeah.
for manufacturers, because if they're going to have to comply with
Good
this,
for one.
then
Yeah,
they're going to have to.
absolutely. That's one of the things that we say about California when they pass these various bills, is that it has that wave effect across the country. And so, you know, you're not going to have Procter and Gamble just change its formulation to comply with California. It's going to have to do it across the country. And so absolutely, you know, looking to our states who are being aggressive and being able to pass that legislation in whatever way we know gets to these issues of disclosure and removal, right? Banning of various toxics that we know are harmful is a great success story. And we want to thank all of our great friends at the various New York nonprofits that are making that happen.
Before we go, I just wanted to mention that next month, December 6th, at the same time, 12 o'clock, will be our presentation on radon. So keep checking
Excellent.
back to the PIT website, because we are trying to do these monthly, and would love to have you back.
Great. Well, nice to see everyone. And thanks so much for your time and for being present. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.